Good evening, everyone. So, as you can see, we are going to discuss about advocacy as a method of social work practice. So, this class is completely dedicated to MSW students who are in the final year, second year, and based on request from some of the students, we are going to discuss this topic, Block 1, Unit 1 of MSW 017. Now, this is the content. This is Unit 1, Block 1. And if you see, the first unit talks about the advocacy as a method of social work practice. So, in this block, there are four blocks in this subject, MSW 017. There are four blocks. Two blocks talks about contemporary methods of social work, whereas remaining two blocks discusses about the values of social work. So in this unit, we are going to discuss about advocacy as a method of social work practice. So let us move directly. But before proceeding further on, I always say that the study material for various competitive exams, whether it is UGC NET or any other exam, if you see, for them, if you are searching for some reliable study material, then of course I personally recommend to everyone that please go through Ignou study material. The reason being very simple, that the expert committee who completely designs this material, who prepares this material, they are of India's topmost senior most professors. So from here you can see they are the one of the professors who are the best in their areas. So now I'm going directly to the topic. See, initially you will see a lot of these things discussing about what block 1 talks about, what unit 1, unit 2 discusses, 3, 4, 5, 6. So basically there are 6 units in this block, and in this first unit, advocacy as a method of social work practice, we are going to have all these things like what is the nature and meaning of advocacy, what is the purpose of advocacy, principles and objectives of advocacy, and what are the strategies, who are the beneficiaries, and what are the skills required to be an advocate in case of social work practice. And at last, what are the challenges faced by social workers, professional social workers, when they go for advocacy? So these are the things that we are going to have a discussion on that. We will understand that. Now, if we see advocacy originates basically from the word advocare, which means calls to someone else or to speak on behalf of somebody as a legal counselor. See, when we say a person is not able to raise his or her voice, is there a person, somebody else, who raises their voice, who comes to help that person to talk about on his behalf or her behalf? So advocacy is the word which is derived from advocare, which means to call to someone's aid, someone's to help, right? Now, if we proceed further on, here they have very clearly said advocacy is a core process of addressing inequality and disparity. See, this line is very important to understand. There are various segments, there are various class in our society. Some of them are very well educated, having very good income and all that, whereas some are relatively poor, less opportunities in terms of healthcare, in terms of education or education, whatever you say, in terms of livelihood, in terms of social capital, social infrastructure, and all that. So, advocacy is a powerful method which helps in getting all these aspects, all these areas, which makes people more empowered, which helps in reducing inequalities. So, the theoretical knowledge and understanding of models and phases of advocacy enables social workers to link contemporary method of advocacy with other methods of social work, and it enhances the social work interventions with diverse issues and manifold population. So this starting paragraph, it basically discusses about the various important aspects of advocacy from beginning. Now, if we proceed further on, the original mission of social work had much to do with championing the right of society's most vulnerable members, from children to homeless people to physically disabled. Now, if we see, it is further moving on with saying that there are certain sections of society which are most vulnerable. For example, from children, from street children, the children who are unable to get their fundamental basic rights which are mentioned in basic constitution, right to free and compulsory education. We talk about that laws and all that. So for children to homeless people to physically disabled or physically challenged, so a social worker has to look after all these segments, all these sections of society, which helps, I mean, which are very much important for their overall, quality, improving the quality of life. So that is all about that. Now, see this. The social workers continue to carry out the torch for those who need help to succeed in our society. As I have discussed you earlier, that the society in which we live, digital society, comprises of several varieties, several class of people. Some of them are much more well versed. Some of them are in middle class. Some of them are lower middle class. Some of them are below poverty line or above poverty line, which we say APL or BPL. So, as a social worker, we need to help those sections of society which which are which are looking for somebody. Now we say that we work for empowerment of people. We make people to help themselves. But if we talk about advocacy, advocacy simply says, yeah, if we proceed further on, it says, while only a small percentage of nations have a million social workers count advocacy as their primary job duty. All social workers carry a philosophical charge to protect and empower the vulnerable and disadvantaged. They do so through a variety of means, including writing, lobbying, organizing local protest, and helping to change laws that adversely affect vulnerable and disadvantaged members of society. So, further, if I read this statement and then I will discuss what it talks about. Today's social workers employ a full range of techniques for advocacy, ranging from protest, sit-ins, to harnessing the power of internet to network with others to affect change. Now, this talks about various aspects of how a social worker go for advocacy of these marginalized sections of society, these vulnerable sections of society. So it is very much important that apart from being a social worker who carry out some philosophical charge to protect and empower vulnerable and disadvantaged, it is also very, very important to find out various other means of raising the voice of people whose voice are not listened, whose voice are not well taken care of. So that's why this is very important that as a social worker we have to have the knowledge, the values, the ethical base for social work, for advocacy. So, for one thing, they see firsthand the difficulties faced by clients who lack the resources for maintaining the basic human needs for themselves and their families. See, this paragraph basically talks about the social workers' perspective. What are their role when they go for advocacy? Social workers will work with social service agencies to facilitate economic maintenance, protect a small safety net, or ensure availability of health and mental health services. Now, if we see these various sections of society which do not talks, which are unable, which is unable to raise their voice, or they do not know what are the means through which they can come to mainstream and they can ask for their fundamental basic rights. Now for social workers are those, as a social worker we go and we talk about all these aspects which makes their life difficult, which makes them vulnerable to policymakers, to politicians, to government, to governance, everybody. We talk about that, right? So, so I think we are unable to see this video. So I will let me go to that. I'm really sorry why we are, yes. Yeah. Now let us go to and we see. I'm really sorry initial few minutes because it was we were unable to see these paragraphs. So let us go to this thing. So from page one, from first page, I'll just directly go to this page. See, from here we have started and we went on to discuss about the Unit-1 and we talked about the expert committee which is mentioned here to talk about the course description and all that. So the Unit-1, Unit-2 and 3 we have skipped now. These are the things that which are important. So if somebody going from first minute of this video, please bear with us because this was a thing that we have discussed. Now, see, talking about mobilizing resources, public opinion, interacting with agencies whose responsibilities are to serve the needs of vulnerable population are always social workers champion the right of individuals, communities, and societies at large through active participation in political process. Now, if we see mobilizing resources, what is the public opinion about certain program or policy? How and up to what extent a program or a policy or a particular program that has been formulated by a particular government, is it reaching directly to the people for whom it is being designed, implemented, or is it not? So interacting with all those agencies which are responsible to serve the needs of vulnerable population, and these are very important aspects of implementation of programs and policies. At the same time, trying to mobilize the resources, whether it is non-government organization or government organization or public sector, how we can mobilize financial resources, human resources, and others in understanding the needs, wants, and demands of people in those sections of society which are vulnerable, which requires immediate support, help. So these are very important aspects of advocacy. So whether concerned about an individual's need or social policy reform, social workers are most frequently the voice of change and social justice. See this line. This is the most important line which I have read right now. See, they are voice for change and social justice. Social justice itself is a very big topic to discuss, to understand, and our constitution, the various fundamental rights, various fundamental duties, the various sections, what you say, various clauses, various articles of our constitution talks about, from preamble to various sections talks about social justice. So social workers, as a social workers, talk about changing changing the status quo. We talk about changing and bringing the social justice to the people who are underserved, who are vulnerable sections of our society. So this is again very important. Now, if we see what is the nature of advocacy, what is the meaning of advocacy? So the word advocacy means different things to different people, different professions. For example, they have discussed about a lawyer's perspective. A lawyer would always refer advocacy as an art of speaking in court, representing their client's case and examining the witness. So this is a perspective of a lawyer. Now, if we talk about social worker act as a advocates for their clients who are disadvantaged in some way or the other. So this is again very important, that as a social worker, we talk about the rights, the fundamental rights or the basic rights or the rights, natural rights, or the various aspects of laws which are very well, which are to be implemented by the law, by the programs, by the policies. But if it is not implemented, people do not get their uh, basic things, and they becomes underserved, disadvantaged sections of society. So we as a social worker discusses about it. We do advocacy for them. Further, if we see, a doctor or a nurse may raise his or her voice against malpractices that may be followed in hospitals or clinics where a particular treatment process is found to be faulty. So this is again very important from medical profession point of view, that if somebody is raising a voice against something which is not good for society, is again a kind of advocacy work. So often such interventions by medical care professionals may not be considered as an advocacy, since the primary job of medical practitioner is to treat the patient. See, again, this is very important. Now, however, if such an interventions could affect positive change in a way, the future patients would receive treatment. So, a non-government organization (NGO) working in an urban community may fight against the municipal body for the restoration of hygienic conditions in locality. So here, if you see, it is talking about the role of the NGO as an advocate, right? A village community may be led by an NGO, right, to prevent illegal felling of trees in nearby forest. Citizens group may challenge the authorities for malpractices in service delivery system in the town. So similarly, social work trainees in course of their field work practicum may want to facilitate easy access to social security services like old age pension and housing scheme of the government for poor and less privileged in the society. So if we see, this talks about the role of social workers and as an advocate, as an change agent. So these are some of the important aspects. Now it is very clear that different people will engage in different form of advocacy that could range from quasi-legal to meeting personal services, issues in welfare administration, or to fulfill the rights of a specific group or populations. So advocacy is not a very simple uh, and direct meaning to everybody. It is different for different sections of a profession or kind of people. Now, if we see, we go to find out what's the purpose, what are the purposes of advocacy. So the number one that talks about is the prevent human rights violations, promote people's right, and help maintain control over their own lives. This is again very, very important. As a human being, we have certain human rights. If somebody is violating that, as a advocate, as a social worker, we may go for that. We can have that rights of the people whose rights are violated. We can raise a voice against them. We can ask to various agencies. We can go to police. We can go to court. We can file an PIL. So these are the things which are important aspects of advocacy. Now, if we see the realization of constitutional safeguard and fundamental rights, if as a social worker in the field you find that the fundamental rights are not being taken care of by the authorities, we can, as a social worker, we can go for advocacy and we can restore, we can realize the constitutional safeguards and fundamental rights of the parties which are suffering from them, for the sections of society which are not getting their fundamental rights. So these are again important aspects of advocacy. What is the purpose of advocacy? Now, if we see, facilitate the equitable allocation and funding of resources for welfare, provision of social services, and social development. So basically, this point talks about equitable allocation and funding of resources. Now, what is the purpose of allocation of resources? To empower the communities, societies, groups, or individuals who do not have basic access to all these resources. So, as an advocate, the social workers must talk on their behalf, must raise their concern on behalf to authorities, to agencies, in front of agencies, in front of policymakers. So that is again the purpose of advocacy. Now we talk about the another important aspects, that is to protect individuals and groups facing harassment and ill treatment by affecting structural changes in social and political system and institutions. So again, this is a very important aspect of advocacy, that as a social worker we have to protect the interest of the individuals, groups, communities which are not getting proper treatment. So again, this is very important. Now, if we see, promote social inclusion and raise awareness of barriers faced by socially excluded groups and communities. India is a very diverse country. Bharat is a very diverse country. We have a lot of communities, caste system, language, food, culture, habit. India, as Mahatma Gandhi ji has said, that India resides in villages, and there are variety of communities, caste, and all these political belief, and a lot of things. So, if you go to rural areas, villages, we will find that there are various kinds of practices which excludes people from living in a certain aspect. They sometimes do not get their basic rights. So as a social worker, the purpose of advocacy is to promote social inclusion, and raise the awareness of barriers faced by socially excluded groups and communities. So we have to work as a advocate for them for their basic rights, and we have to generate awareness among them that see these are basic fundamental rights of these people. Sorry. Now if we see further, to support and empower people and group to speak for themselves, again this is very important aspect, on behalf of other members and groups in their neighborhood who are unable to speak or fight for their own rights. So as an advocate, the social workers has to support. Initially we have to support them, we have to empower them, we have to make them aware, as we have discussed in initial this just above point. We have to make them aware about their fundamental rights, various legal perspectives, various legal supports to the people who are underserved, who are vulnerable, who are marginalized, right? So this is again important. Now if we see further on, the purpose of advocacy is to help the people to explore range of options that are available to fight against oppression and clarifying a particular course of action. People who are oppressed, people who are depressed, people who do not get their rights on time, people who do not get benefits of the program, the policies of the government, we have to help them as a social worker. We have to explore, we have to make them aware about the various options that are available to them. So this is again important aspect of advocacy. Now if we see, as a social worker, the advocacy is also very much important to facilitate the process of establishing new policies. Why new policies? To tackle social injustice and protect the vulnerable groups and populations. So for social justice, we have to act as an advocate for vulnerable groups and populations. And while making while the government is making any policy or program, we as a catalyst of social change, as a social worker, we talk about, we must raise the concern, the ground realities in the policy framing, in the formulation of policies. What are the loopholes in the existing policies, programs, legislations, so that the quality of life can be improved of those people who are marginalized, who are vulnerable, who do not get support from law, litigation, or from everybody. So these are some of the purpose of advocacy. Now if we go to understand what are the principles and objectives of advocacy, so it is very clearly mentioned here. The principles in social work act as a guidelines, and it helps the social work professionals to fulfill their roles and responsibilities towards social work profession and clients in particular. So if you are dealing with certain sections of community, certain groups of community, as a social worker, as an advocate for them, you have to consider all these aspects into consideration. Number one is the need based. So prioritization of action is very important when we go to field to understand various aspects of life of all those who are vulnerable, who are marginalized, who do not get uh, the the justice. So a proper assessment of clients' vulnerability has to be done, especially focusing on meeting emergency needs like protection in case of children and abused children in particular. Individuals facing physical and sexual violence and torture within family or establishment, people living in war zones or facing civil war, refugees, displaced people, minorities, ethnic population facing violence and ethnic cleansing, people face this starvation and destitution to name a few. So these are various situations or cases where as a social worker we have to go to find out what is the priority of the hour. We have to work as an advocate for them. We have to raise voice on their behalf, right? So this is the first point. Now if we go to understand the second principle that helps understanding the principle of advocacy, talks about the professional social workers should work on behest of the client. If need be, social workers may advise clients regarding various options of intervention available with their pros and cons and of each alternative. The clients, however, may have to be facilitated to make informed choices. See, I'm talking about the informed choices. For example, choosing the best among the options that are available and in the view of past experiences and future difficulties that a client may face. So, a social worker must clarify to the client, see, we are going to have this thing, we are going to take this decision on your behalf, the positive aspect, the pros and the negative consequences of this decision will be like this. Would you like to proceed further on? Because as a social worker, I am going to talk about your basic fundamental rights, the basic uh, aspects of your improving your life, the social injustice that you are facing. So we have to direct to the clients all these aspects, right? Now the third thing is conflict avoidance. This principles is basically talking about saying that through examples of conflict in advocacy action, maybe on a higher side, it is generally held that confrontational strategies should be avoided unless all form of non-confrontational modes and strategies fail. Confrontationist strategies is often a drain or energy of trying. It may lead to either party to challenge each other and may prevent the progress of change process. However, confrontation as a strategy could be the only option when the client is faced with serious life-threatening situations or when there is a consensus that things would not change for better unless system, social, structural, and political are challenged. So, avoiding the conflict, avoiding the confrontational situations is again one of the guiding principle when we go for advocacy. See, again, as a strategy to solve the problems or to raise the awareness or to create a, a movement or do advocacy on behalf of your client, it is always advised to avoid the conflict. Again, it becomes very, very important to have a conflict or confrontational kind of strategy when your client is facing serious life threatening situation, when is when he or she is not feeling that he or she will survive because the other party is very, very dominant. So it is very, very important that we first initially try to avoid the conflict, right? Now, if we see the next principle is that of when we go for advocacy, the professional social workers must take into consideration the social and cultural context in which client is living. Linguistic and communication aspect need to be understood so that material design for campaigns are developed keeping in view the local language. So the help of linguists and experts having grounding in local language, dialect, and literature may have to be taken to design messages that appropriate content. So all these aspects. Now, the most important thing is that when we go to rural areas, tribal areas, or anywhere for advocating the the, the client, we first of all need to understand the linguistic and communication aspect. We first of all understand how we are going to design the advocacy materials, how we are going to proceed with IEC, information, education, and communication in local language, in local dialect. So, this is that we have to see the cultural sensitivity as a social workers before going to have advocacy for our on our behalf of our client. So this is again a very important principle. Now if we see duty of care, this is again a very important principle. It is duty of the professional to avoid situations that are illegal and that may have an adverse impact on the client. This is very important. It is often witnessed that confrontational mode of protest and campaigning, especially when large-scale movements are initiated to create pressure on the government or social or political system being opposed, some from among the campaign participants may resort to act like stone pelting, destroying public property, physically challenging officials and opponents. So this becomes a really very embarrassing situation. This becomes very illegal kind of thing that when you have been given you have been given that right to do your movement very peacefully, but the crowd becomes aggressive. They starts, you know, acting very badly. Using this word badly because stone pelting, destroying public property, physically challenging the government officials, the police, etc., really creates violence and it destroys the public property, and that creates that violates the existing laws of the land. So we should, as a professional social worker, we should always try to avoid all these things. See, doing advocacy on behalf of our client, groups, communities is always recommended. You are always free to do that, but with proper care, proper duty towards the profession, right? So professionals have duty to monitor every actions of members or group who are involved in campaigning or who are raising their voice against the practices which are not good at that point of time, right? So it is the duty of the social work professionals to monitor every member for their every action that are being taken care of. So that is the thing. Now, avoiding conflict of interest, this is again a principle which is very important for advocacy. The professionals, because of position he or she enjoys as one of the frontline leaders in advocacy work or campaign, may be in viable position or to appropriate apportion some of the benefits that may accrue to the client. Now, violating this basic principle may lead to disastrous consequences in terms of premature termination of advocacy process. Further, if we see, a visible conflict of interest may create doubt in the minds of clientele population and may lead to some clients dropping out and others may challenge or oppose the leadership, development of fissure and factions within the group. So avoiding the conflict of interest is the very important aspect when we go for campaigning, we go for advocacy, right? So as a social worker, we have to take care of this thing. While we design, we go for advocacy, right? The next point is very important and it is the crux and we generally do this thing and that is of critical thinking. See, social injustice is often located in social and political structures. So this is again a kind of situation we always face it. Hence, a critical thinking is very important to locate and identify the forces at work that sustain an oppressive and exploitative system. Critical analysis focuses more on socioeconomic outcomes, right? And collective injustice. So structures are forces that shape social policy which underpins prominent social operations, injustice and inequalities, right? Further, as a young, he suggests a person's social location in structures differentiated by class, gender, age, ability, race, or caste often implies predictable status in law, education, possibility, occupation, access to resources, political power, and prestige. So, see, this is based on a research by Young in year 2000. This suggested It was suggested by Young that a person's social location in a structure differentiated by various aspects are one of the reasons that are relatively permanent sometimes. Hence, locating a force of operation that are deep rooted within social and political system, it is to be identified and challenged to affect lasting changes in client situation and removing them from injustice. So this is important aspect. Now, welfare state may be more or less successful in tackling structural injustice. We talk about welfare state, right? We study in for constitution. But when the state fails in its duty to protect rights and entitlements of their citizens, the advocacy work has to come to play. So, based on critical thinking, we as a professional social workers has to analyze the various aspects of the initiatives, the various aspects of social injustice, the duties of welfare state, government, governance, social injustice, social inequality. We have to analyze all these and then we have to design the campaigns, the programs for social welfare and restoration of the rights of the parties, the individuals, the communities, the groups who are aggrieved, who are suffering from that, right? Now, the important principle again is that empowerment as a sustainable change. As a social worker, before going to have an advocacy work, we first of all need to understand this thing that the client's capacity and opportunity to change and to address their own needs will get a boost if the advocacy work undertaken adopts a participatory approach. See, highlight this word participatory approach. so that client as actors in advocacy works gain confidence in themselves. And how will they gain confidence? By learning the process and steps involved in the advocacy. So this is again very important, that we have to empower them on sustainable basis for bringing sustainable change, right? Of course, this strategy may not fit to cases where client referred to it is not in position, whether it is physically or mentally or economically, to participate in the process of advocacy work. But we have to consider this principle of empowering our client as on sustainable basis is again very important, right? Now if we see further on, the important principle which acts as a guideline for advocacy is that of identifying and challenging systemic flaws and institutional barriers. It is always necessary to identify all these barriers that promote and sustain exploitation in operation. So, as a social worker, we need to be a very critical thinker, critical analyst. At the same time, we try to locate and find out the barriers which are causing the exploitation and operation of certain sections of the society. This should be the prime principle on the basis of which social workers work towards eradicating poverty, inequality, injustice, operations faced by clients and their clientele population. We try to have that thing in our mind when we go for advocacy. Now, next point is limited use. Rampant use of advocacy to solve all types of problems of client, especially when it is in domain of personal or quasi-personal relationships like marriage, family, neighborhood, closely communities, may cause more harm than provide relief to client. So we have to consider this aspect as well before going for their advocacy, because marriage and family, if husband and wife are fighting or discussing, or husband is beating to wife, so as a social worker you can always have that domestic violence you know uh, voice against that. But when the matter is of family, family related aspect, family related dispute or counseling or something like that, so we have to be very cautious in raising, in finding a particular set of aspects before proceeding to client approach, right? Before going to client side advocacy, we have to be very cautious, very well aware of all aspects of their personal kind of relationships or aspects, and then we should move further on for advocacy of or on behalf of your client, right? Next point is establishment of social justice. This is again one of the principle of advocacy to social workers. Now, if we see this first line, it talks about valuing advocacy for social justice involves a deep sensitivity towards what? The needs of all people, but, but most specifically to needs of poor, oppressed, and those who are disenfranchised, who are not getting their fundamental rights, their fundamental, uh, basic livelihood kind of aspect. See, we are talking here about the poor, the oppressed, the vulnerable, the marginalized sections of society. So It embraces a global perspective, believing that an injustice to one is injustice to all. Injustice to one is injustice to all. So, a vital aspect of social workers training is the values of social justice, the value of equality and empowerment. And for that purpose, advocacy involves promoting all policies that safeguard the rights and confirm equity and social justice for all people. So this is very, 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 very important. Now, flaws in existing policies, programs have to be identified through an exercise called policy analysis and plan of action for advocating change in existing policies will have to be initiated. So understanding, and this is again a kind of a critical analysis to find out what are the challenges, what are the flaws, where are the leakages in the existing policies or programs of the government, and based on their major aspects we can proceed to go for advocacy, right? Next principle is that of networking and collaborative initiatives. The large scale issues and problems or issues, or for that matter even micro level problems where the opponent is politically strong and powerful, there may be need to build a network and partnership to make concentrated and concerned effort so that challenges are met. See here the important aspect is that if the opponent party against whom we are going for advocacy of our client, if that opponent is politically strong and very powerful, economically, financially, or socially, so we have to be very, very uh, well a network of the various agencies. We have to have our own network and network of groups, individuals, communities, general public, organizations, so that we can raise the concern of our client, right? So these are few principles which guides us, which directs us before going for advocacy. Now, what are the objectives of advocacy? See, advocacy work basically represents a process of affecting or initiating change either with or on behalf of client groups. So, it is very, very important that the activists or the social work professionals and organizations who stand or show concern for upliftment of vulnerable, oppressed, exploited sections of society, right? So we have to understand the core issues of all these sections of society on whom behalf we are going to do advocacy. So most often that not such actions are in context of legal policy advocacy actions by organizations that involve macro level practice. As a social work method, it is always important to have certain objectives and outcomes in the mind. Number one, if we talk about, is the obtain services or resources that would not otherwise be provided. So this is an important objective of an advocacy. Further, to prevent and protect the vulnerable individuals, social groups, and communities from what? From abuse, from oppression, from violation of their basic human fundamental rights, human rights. So these are important aspects we should consider as a social worker before going for advocacy, right? Now, modify or influence policies or practices that adversely affect groups or communities. is again another important objective. Now, to promote legislation or policies that will result in provision for requisite resources or services, again, is an important aspect of or objective of advocacy, right? Now, let us go to strategies of advocacy. What are the different strategies how we can go for advocacy? So, strategy has very clearly been defined here. It is defined as a contingency plan to achieve one or more goals under condition of uncertainty. See, the socio-economic political environment in which organizations operate, individuals live, is always uncertain. It is not always that is certain. So we have to have a plan for uncertain situations. So the word strategy, as per Friedman, denotes a comprehensive way to try to pursue political ends, including the threat or actual use of force in dialects of wills, in which both adversaries interact. So, the various strategies and techniques that could be used are here discussed, right? So, the important aspect is that the evidence gathering, data collection, and aggregation. And it is done for what? To highlight the extent of violations of human rights, plight of destitute and neglected, and harassed and oppressed, filing of RTI, Right to Information Act. So all these are the various aspects of advocacy in terms of finding evidence, finding some factual information, some data to proceed further on. Now, filing representation, speaking, writing, or acting on behalf of another is important activity or strategy or through which we can raise the concern in front of authorities, in front of legislature, in front of the policymaker, in terms of government, right? Now scaling up reach, and for what? To broaden the support base, right? Globalization, and it is written here, globalization, right? Volunteer mobilization, mobilizing of cause lawyers, civic engagement, leadership building, fund mobilizing for large scale advocacy campaigns, highlighting issues in media and electronic advocacy. This is again one of the strategy that is being followed by advocates, social workers. Organization building, developing network of individuals at grassroots level is again one of the way through which social workers try to raise their concern, right? Now, if we proceed further on, networking and coalition formation, individual clients, social workers, or advocacy NGOs on their own way may turn out to weak players while working against relatively powerful opponents. See, this is very important. When the party against whom we are raising the concern, if that person is very powerful, so we have to utilize, we have to take help or assistance from our network, from our known person who can help us. So it is said, however, as a part of advocacy work, by linking with other more powerful actors like national and transnational NGOs, political representatives, famed social activists, etc., always works. So linking, so getting, their support is very, very important, right? Further, it is said When government realize that there is public shaming because of their actions, for instance, torturing prisoners, they may think twice about tarnishing their reputation on the international stage. So this is again the important aspect of advocacy. As a social worker, we are bringing the real issues in front of policymakers, in front of the government, in terms of judiciary, everywhere, in terms of international agencies, international government, and everywhere, right? So in democratic countries, politicians depend on votes, and threat of damaged reputation can put politicians' job in jeopardy. So this is very important aspect, that you should have a network, you should have linkages, you should have contact with various national, international associations, bodies, political system, and all that, so that if the opponent against whom you are raising the concern for your client, if that is more powerful, then you should take help of all these persons, right? Now, another strategy is that of legal awareness and seeking legal redress. Filing of cases in appropriate court. For example, if the matter is that of family court, we should go and we should raise a concern there. If the matter is of greater public interest, if it affects a larger section of society, we should go and raise a PIL. We should file an PIL, public interest litigation. And this is again very important aspect of advocacy for the sections of society who do not talk about their rights. Next is demonstration and agitation, sit-ins, rallies, nukkad nataks, right? So demonstration is again one of the strategy of advocacy. Further, using various forms to highlight the real ground issues. A forum in any assembly designated to discuss issues, regulations, rules, public matters, laws, or differing opinions. So these are examples, are public hearings. I mean, see, they have discussed this thing, so we are sharing this thing, that examples are public hearings, legislative committees, agency board meetings, supervisory sessions. So all these try to do what? They try to highlight the real issues, the issues faced by the vulnerable, oppressed, poor, marginalized sections of society, against whom or on behalf of whom we are doing advocacy work, right? So two features are usually present. Number one, a set of specific procedures to guide the conduct of the participants, and number two, a decision making mechanism. So this is for what? This is for raising the awareness, as highlight, as to discuss the pressing issues, the highlighting the issues, right? Now policy advocacy. Advocating for policy changes, establishing new policies, lobbying for enactment of new legislations, or making changes in existing ones. So these are one of the strategies. This is one of the strategy for advocacy. See, if any matter that is related with that of policy or program, we should do policy analysis. We should do policy advocacy on behalf of the clients or sections of society who do not talk about them, who are not able to discuss all these things, because whether they are illiterate, because there are financial constraints, right, or some other reasons. So these are one of, or not one but many strategies of advocacy, as it has been discussed in this thing. right? Now, beneficiaries of advocacy. So, advocacy is an active promotion of cause or principle. It involves actions that lead to selected goal for which many possible strategies are used. So, advocacy as a social work method may be used either for such clients who are not in position to fight for their own rights or participate in the process of redressing their difficulties because they may be lacking the capacity to do so. So this is very important. And here the examples are given. For example, the child laborers, the children under abuse, the elderly, the terminated ill, the mentally retarded. They may be beyond the reach of professionals like bonded laborers, women facing domestic violence, tribal women, or tribals living in remote areas, and minorities facing social exclusion. So, as a social worker, we should become their voice, right? So, those in reach of professionals would be facilitated to participate in the process of advocacy action. The focus of advocacy is not in providing direct services, but in making clients' environment conducive so that what? So that they can feel empowered. They can understand, they can realize what is good, what is bad for them, right? And providing prompt services and establishing a just environment free from discrimination and exploitation. So making them aware that look, this is as per law, you are entitled, you must get these facilities, benefits, rights as a program, as a policy of the government, and you are not getting, so you should be well aware of, right? So advocacy does not necessarily involve confrontation or conflict, but it may be used selectively depending upon the situation. This is very important that advocacy always try to raise the concern of the people who are unable to do their own, right? Now, what are the skills of advocacy? What are the skills that are required to become an advocate when we go for social work, right? So there are various skills which are required. Specific skills are mentioned here. For example, this one paragraph. For example, policy analysis, group facilitation, public mobilization, having good communication skill, competency in negotiation, analysis of multidimensional and systematic information. These are some of very important skills when we go for advocacy. And in the process of advocacy, a stage, uh, generally people generally achieve a stage where client realize the extent and manner in which they have been befooled, they have been exploited, they have been not given their human rights, they have been deprived of their basic entitlements, right? So if people feel like that, if your client feel like that, then you have done a very good work, right? So at micro level, social workers have to understand social and cultural forces that are cause of oppression. Social workers must understand major social, political, economic forces that have shaped the development of social policy, right? So these are the things. Now, challenges of advocacy. The Code of Ethics of Social Work obligates all professionals to commit to practice and to commit to and practice advocacy. However, however, social workers, they face various kinds of barriers to practice advocacy. Some of it is a lack of appropriate attitude, which often inhibit professionals from using advocacy work as a method of social work intervention. Again, it is said through research of Ezel in 2001 and Hoffer in 2006 and Senizer and Lester in 2001 that advocacy work is too demanding on time, energy, and finances. It requires a lot of financial management. It requires a lot of your energy and time, because when social workers go on for certain causes, for certain changes in society or in law or in status quo or whatever thing you say, the local, state, or national policies law often do it in their free time using their, I mean, the social workers do it very aggressively, but it takes time. You have to invest your time. A misconception among social workers is that advocacy often adopts a confrontational approach, which prevents them from using it more often and then not. So this is based on the research of Schaffer and Horsey in 2003. It says that, see, try to understand this thing. This is a misconception among social workers that if we have to do advocacy on behalf of certain sections of society, we should be uh, raising our voice against the government, against the policymakers, against the police, against the bureaucracy, coming to the road and doing dharna pradarshans and all that and all that. Having confrontational approach is not always the good one. You should try to convince, you should try to follow the management of various activities, management of the things that you want to do, you want to get it done, right? So confrontational approach is not always good. It is always, it may be followed when you find there is a life threatening situation to your client, right? So this is again very important. So all these things has been discussed here, which we have discussed earlier. Now, advocacy is an activity requiring patience, tenacity, compromise, long-term commitment, energy, board, sorry, broad base of support, research, political skills, knowledge of government, and capacity to analyze. This is again based on the research of the Senizer and Lester in 2001. And this is the most important line of entire this chapter. Please read this very carefully, that if you are going for advocacy, you must do your homework, and that is you must develop the skill of having patience, tenacity. You should know where and how to compromise on what stage. It is a long-term commitment. It requires a lot of energy, time, finance, support, and again research of laws, research of programs, research of all socio-economic, political, cultural, legal dimensions before jumping into advocacy, right? So you should also have a political management skill. You should have the knowledge of the government, how government operates, how government formulates or designs plans, policies, how it do amendment, what is the legislature, how it works, how judiciary works, how government works, how rules and regulations are formed, how it is implemented, what are the bottleneck of the government, bureaucracy, judiciary. Everywhere you have the capacity to analyze all these aspects, and then after doing your homework, your skill development, you should move ahead with advocacy work. And this requires a lot of patience, right? You cannot quickly go and quickly fix the solution, you cannot quickly fix the problem, right? So this is what all advocacy. This is all about advocacy that we have discussed in this chapter, and this is a very important basic concept that we should understand about advocacy, right? So in the next chapter, the next unit, that is of linkages of advocacy with other methods of social work, how it is related with other things, other aspects like social welfare administration, social action and advocacy, social work research and advocacy, networking and advocacy, awareness campaign and advocacy, PIL and advocacy, resource mobilization and advocacy. We will all understand in the next session, maybe tomorrow as soon as possible. So please share your feedback, your opinion, so that we can improve further on, right? And if you have any queries, any comments, you can message us, you can WhatsApp us, you can visit my website. I have shared my number and you can contact me, right? So see you soon in the next session. Thank you very much.